Today we wanted to talk a little bit about accommodations for school, whether you are whatever grade you are in up to college, and we're hopefully going to touch a little bit on work and accommodations dealing with the boss. Tell us who you are, Nate.
So I'm Nate Pope. I'm an occupational therapist. I've been working a lot with pediatrics in the school setting and also with brain recovery, especially concussions and minor traumatic brain injuries. Blending those two worlds together, a lot of kids that have head injuries or concussions are trying to find accommodations for school. You know, and if it's summer break, they're trying to get back to school. And getting back to school when you've had a head injury and you have symptoms is sometimes a little bit of a challenge. And so I've navigated this territory many times of accommodations. They're called 504 accommodations officially in public schools.
So there were two types of accommodations, right? Mm-hmm. You mentioned to me. So it was 504, and what's the other one?
There's also IEP accommodations. So an IEP is an individualized education plan. Okay. It's the law of special education that basically enables students with special needs to have help and to get what they need. 504 is an amendment to the law that created the IEP.
Okay.
So an IEP is usually kids who already have special needs. Sometimes they happen to maybe have a diagnosis and have special needs and they've been in special education, but then they get a head injury and it creates a need for additional accommodations. But what they usually would do is they would just increase accommodations in their IEP as part of the individualized education plan. If you were not in special education, which many kids aren't when they get a head injury or concussion, they went from being in general education and not having any challenges really, to now they have all sorts of challenges because of their head injury. Usually a 504 plan is what is most appropriate for someone in that situation.
What are the action steps or what's required to get a 504 plan?
Yeah, so often misunderstood and sometimes even by school staff, teachers or principals, they will make parents sometimes believe that you need a diagnosis or you need to go to the doctor to get them to show that you actually legitimately have something official in terms of a diagnosis so that they will be willing to give you a 504 accommodation. That is not how it's written. They should be able to internally see your educational needs. What are you struggling with since you maybe had a head injury or a concussion, for example? And they can do their own testing in-house in the school system to figure that out and should not need to rely on the medical model outside of school to diagnose or to prescribe something in the school. Usually in the school, you determine what those needs are with your own testing, and then you also write up a plan how to accommodate for what you found in your testings. But a lot of times it's conversational. A parent goes in and says, my kid hit his head, had a concussion, and now their focus is way off and they can't get their homework done and their grades are poor because they can't memorize unless they have a lot more time, you know, and so the accommodations start becoming more of a natural, okay, what would help them? Well, if he had more time, that would help. And sometimes he just gets overwhelmed and needs a break, you know, and so breaks, more time on tests or assignments, a quieter environment sometimes if you have a quieter place in the classroom or even an adjacent room or space that's quieter. Sometimes you just need to have less visual and auditory distraction because you have a hard time attending. So sitting in the front, they call it preferential seating, is better in the front because you're not seeing and hearing as much. if the teacher's just right there and it's you and the teacher, it feels like, rather than the teacher and then all of the students in front of you and then you. So there's a lot of accommodations like that that can be really helpful.
So to recap, if I was a parent and like my kid ended up getting a concussion from playing soccer, I would go to the teacher and I would say, hey, my kid just got a concussion. We're not quite sure what accommodations he needs, but I think he needs something because he's struggling.
Yeah.
Then that's when the teacher can go, okay, let's look at, do they sometimes have options? Because I imagine as a parent or even the student, you're like, I don't know exactly what I need. Do they have generalized options that they're like,
They
oh,
do. They do.
okay.
There's some typical accommodations. Most teams that have done 504 plans will be pretty familiar. You could be, depending on your school, maybe you're in a really rural area and they haven't really done a lot of 504 plans. You may have to be the parent that knows more coming in and say, and I would even use the word 504 so that they're aware, okay, this parent knows that there is such a thing as a 504.
Yeah, okay.
And they're requesting accommodations and want something kind of official. The reason to make it official, and that's what my recommendation is, that if you go from year to year or school to school, and you may go from elementary to junior high or something like that, those can follow you.
Yeah, okay.
And the plan follows you even though the teachers are different.
So even from like high school to college, it transfers, right?
Yes, yeah, and it's not the same. It's not quite as easy as like junior high to high school or elementary to junior high, because college is so different.
Yeah.
So it's their prerogative in college to take a high school 504 plan and say, what makes sense in the college environment that we can do with this 504 plan. But knowing that it exists immediately says, okay, to the college staff, this student needs some accommodations, and let's figure that out. And they may revisit it and add or take from those accommodations depending on what they need at the college level.
Yeah, and hopefully they're improving. And it's like, oh, I only need an extra half an hour every time I do tests. Or
So they change all the time. 504 accommodations are meant to be temporary, actually, because you assume that they're going to, you hope that they're going to continue to improve and not need as much.
Yeah.
I do tell parents, err on the side of keeping anything that they need, even if it's just a little bit of that accommodation, just so you have it.
Okay.
When you're taking ACT tests, any standardized tests like that, it's also sometimes nice to have that 504 to help justify additional accommodations. Okay. Some might get a time and a half or double the time to take the exact same test that everyone else is taking.
Okay.
So that's really helpful.
How does that kind of go in a work environment? What would your suggestions be?
Yeah. Well, it's less uniform because there's so many work environments and so many good and bad bosses and everything in between. That really it's a different, you're not relying on some standardized ways of doing things or some pretty set things like a 504 plan does not exist for return to work stuff. But work environments are supposed to and should accommodate for this sort of thing. And what you first and foremost want to do is to be upfront and honest, like as much as you can. I think it's great to inform work on the details of how your injury is impacting your ability to do what you need to do and how you could perform it better. You could be more effective in your role if certain accommodations were made, if that makes sense. The employer is mostly interested in productivity, it seems, and you still being able to do your job, or at least as much as you can do. If they realize that pushing you too much or making you work in ways that are going to exacerbate symptoms to the degree that you're going to have to take the next day off, or you're going to have to it's going to create some inefficiencies, some inaccuracies, It may decrease your level of performance with communicating with people. You might have irritability levels get really high. You may have a headache that's so bad that you can't think straight or problem solve. There's so many things.
Yeah.
If an employer understands the details enough to know, here's how and give it an official name. I have post-concussion syndrome, if that's what it is. Like if you've hit your head and you still have symptoms, that's probably what you have. Or I even had a minor traumatic brain injury. Sometimes that speaks even louder.
Yeah, it does.
And so you can use those terms if you have doctors' documentation and official diagnoses. Then of course bring that, because that adds credence to everything you say. But you can just say, I think it's better than trying to feel like I'm forcing you to help me. If you just say, this is what's going on, and I really want to do the best I can in this workplace. I want to be able to perform at least at the best of my ability, considering I have all this stuff going on.
Yeah.
I do have, if you need it, I do have all the official documentation, and it's right here.
Yeah.
And I have this and this and this.
Okay.
So you're not using it as a weapon to, to try to attack the boss and make them feel forced into accommodating for you.
Yeah.
It doesn't really create for great relations anyways, but I think it's nice to go to the boss as hey, I am expecting and hoping that you are the good boss that I assume you are, and that you're going to help me out so I can help you out.
Yeah.
And just help them see that if I have these accommodations, I believe I can do this much. And so far, doing what we've been doing, maybe, I've only been able to do this much, but it's because I end up with this headache, or I end up with this or that. And a boss, when they see more clearly, if they'll listen to you, I think you create the best situation.
Yeah.
When you don't have the best situation, then sometimes you have to play a little bit of hardball, and you may have to be like, look, I just can't do this.
Yeah.
I need these accommodations, and the doctor said so.
Well, and in some cases, you're not necessarily required to tell your boss that you've sustained an injury,
right,
and that you've got that going on. I mean, I find oftentimes in the years I've worked with people with brain injuries that's often the best, is to be upfront about that. However, I wonder if sometimes it could be worth it to say something like, hey, lately I've noticed I'm just needing to adjust my schedule a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be giving you more productivity with this schedule. You don't even have to go into all of the symptoms you're dealing with, things like that.
Sure.
But you find the best way for you to optimize what you got to get done.
Sure. Yeah.
And give yourself the breaks you need, advocating for yourself in kind of a different way, I guess.
Yeah. There might be reasons why, and I should have mentioned this, but I'm glad you brought that up. There may be good reasons why you actually don't want to go into any of your personal details of what's going on.
Right.
I like when you can do it and you feel comfortable doing it.
Yeah.
I like that as option number one, because then it's open. It's I have had so many great employers.
Yeah.
That when they know, they bend over backwards to make it work for their employees.
Right.
And part of that was because they were so open and they understand.
Mm-hmm.
But you may be in a situation where them knowing you have a traumatic brain injury might make them like, I don't know if we even want you working here anymore. There can be some bad situations that way, or maybe we're going to give you less shifts and we're not going to use you as much, or we're going to change your role, or so of course there's more complicated issues to deal with that way, and you may decide it's not in your best interest to share those details.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. And at that point, you maybe try the method that you mentioned of saying, it looks like my personal life schedule or whatever, right now I'm only able to do this. And you kind of can say, I hope that this works, and maybe at this point you're saying, if it doesn't, I'm going to go get a different job.
Yeah.
And so you give it a shot and see, without explaining to them all of your details.
Yeah.
You might be able to still get some accommodations by saying, this is what I can do. Does that work for you? Because I think it will help me be more productive.
Right.
Yeah.
I love it. Cool.
Yeah.
Anything else?
You may also consider that your situation is almost too much for you to figure out or problem solve. Like, how do I do this? And recovery from what you're going through really is probably the best answer to your problem. So we'd love to help at NCX Brain Recovery. We help people all the time getting back to school and getting back to work, not by accommodating, but by fixing what's going on. Most patients make full recoveries when it comes to post-concussion syndrome. And we just love what we do because of the lives we're changing. People come in with a lot of symptoms and go away not needing those accommodations anymore because the symptoms are better. And that's probably your best answer if you're looking to get things fixed. But a lot of times you just don't have the luxury of doing therapy before you have to go back to school or work. So you may, do that at a later date.
Subscribe to our channel to get more information like this, and we're always open to other topics if that would be helpful to you with the brain injury you're going through or loved one that's experiencing